This man fell into a chemical bath. When he climbed back up, his body changed in a strange way, eaten by the toxic waste. He rolls around in pain, although he was surrounded by onlookers. Instead of helping, they stood around with their teeth bared, laughing mercilessly. One man tried to take him to the hospital, but as soon as he touched the man's body, his hands burst into flames. Panicked, the man ran home. Everywhere he went, he was corroded by the potion. He panicked and soaked himself in the bathtub. He didn't realize the water in the bathtub would instantly boil over. Before he knew what was happening, a few large pustules appeared on his arms. It was as if something was trying to get out. When he was so scared that he didn't know what to do, he felt an itch on his scalp. He gently tugged on his hair and it was instantly pulled out. Soon he became a monster of great strength. He was afraid that his appearance would frighten his mother, so he fled into the wilderness to make a living. That day, Fowler was on patrol when he came across some thieves. He tried to bring them back to the police station, but they beat him senseless. The situation was not looking good when a strong arm suddenly threw them off their feet. In order to punish the gangsters, this young man performed a combination of punches on the spot. Hundreds of gangsters were subdued on the spot. From that moment on, he was on his way to fight for good and fight with evil. This man's hand forcefully bends the pipe. Then he pushed the gangster's hand into the hot frying pan, though the screams of his heart were heard throughout the room. But the man didn't want to let him go, because he wouldn't let any bad guy go. Another gangster tried to attack, but the man grabbed him by the neck. Then he kept pouring milk into his mouth. Then Melvin calmly went to the gym. Without saying a word, he used dumbbells to send him to hell. Worried that people would see him and be afraid of him, he even thoughtfully put a mop on her face. However, just when he finished everything and was ready to leave, he found some punks bullying the blind girl again. Melvin didn't say a word. He went up to them and started to kick their asses. One of them thinks he's Bruce Lee and pulls out his nunchucks without saying a word. But Melvin dodged the attack and kicked him in the face. Melvin was able to save the girl. After this incident, Melvin grew to love the feeling of saving people. In the days that followed, he was always the first one to come forward when something dangerous happened in the city. He even helped an old woman cross the street. From then on, Melvin's good deeds became a household name. Conscientious businessmen even printed Melvin's image on their clothes for publicity purposes. That day, the blind girl was bullied by the gangsters again. Melvin came out in time to scare them away. In order to repay Melvin for saving her life, the girl decided to give her life to him. With the girl's company, Melvin's fight against evil becomes more and more motivated. This old granny was going home after shopping, but then two gangsters suddenly approached her. They threw down her groceries. Before the grandmother could figure out what was going on, they grabbed their weapons and knocked her unconscious. Then they took her car and started to run away. And as they were leaving in triumph, Melvin, the good guy, flashes right in front of them, and then he leaps onto the roof of the car. The terrified gangsters kept stepping on the gas to get rid of him. Melvin reaches out and throws one of them away. Then he rushed into the car and fought with the other one. In the chaos, the car went out of control and fell off a cliff, although there was a huge explosion. But with the war of a protagonist, Melvin couldn't die at all. Then Melvin went after an old woman. No one would have guessed that the old woman looked harmless, but she was actually a child trafficker. Melvin grabbed the old woman and threw her into the dry cleaning machine without saying a word. By the time the boss found her, she was already dried up. However, the sheriff thought Melvin was a danger, and he put out a warrant for him. Soon the police found the tent where Melvin was staying. At the command of the chief, the police aimed all their guns directly at the tent. Despite pleas for mercy from the public, the officers in charge refused to let him go. In the nick of time, Melvin told his girlfriend to stay where she was. And he went up there alone. The onlookers couldn't stand it any longer and rushed to block the gun. The police had no choice but to lower their guns, but the officers was not happy. He shot at Melvin like crazy, but his bullets couldn't hurt him at all. Angrily, Melvin punched him through the stomach. As the officers lay still on the ground, everyone in the audience smiled broadly. In the end, Melvin and his girlfriend lived happily ever after. This girl had her first period and broke out in a cold sweat. Her toes grew together. Even though Mia is only 16, she knows a lot about female physiology. No woman's toes grow like this after her first period. She was so scared that she went back inside to take a closer look. She realized that her toes had really grown together. Puzzled, she rushed to the hospital for a checkup. The female doctor took a brief look at her toes and sent Mia for a blood test. But while Mia was drawing blood, the doctor stepped aside and dialed a specialist. While she was on the phone, she was staring at Mia strangely. Mia felt uncomfortable, so she pulled out the syringe and left the hospital. For adolescents, they are extremely sensitive when it comes to things like this. When she got home, Mia didn't say anything to anyone, but instead wondered about her origins. She realized that there wasn't a single picture of her mother when she was pregnant. Whenever she was asked about it, her mother always avoided talking about it. On this rare day, her mother was home on vacation. Mia finally found the courage to ask her mother why there was no picture of her when she was born and was she a foundling. Her mother thought she was being unreasonable and told her to go home and do her homework. Her mother didn't answer her question directly, so her suspicions grew even stronger. At night, Mia, who had no desire to sleep, suddenly felt thirsty, so she dragged her tired body to the kitchen. She poured half a box of salt into a cup and drank it all. To hide the change, she hurriedly put on a pair of stockings. Then she went to the supermarket and bought a pair of scissors. She used foundation to cover the bruises on her thighs. Then she used the scissors to cut the sticky toes, and the wound was simply treated with a band-aid. But little did she know that after that, Mia would feel hungry all the time. That day, just after school, she listened to the sound of running water in the fish tank and walked slowly and uncontrollably over to it. The girl quickly grabbed a fish and popped it into her mouth. In a trance, she had eaten a live fish, and it was even delicious. Mia was so nauseous that she ran to the toilet and vomited. She couldn't understand why she had become like this. After hearing her mother's cries, Mia rushed to flush the toilet. Afterward, she realized that her condition had gotten worse. When she woke up, she realized that a layer of greenish-colored skin had fallen off her leg. Worried that her parents would see her, she tucked the skin under the bed because she had to rush to today's biology class. In class, the teacher introduced the body structure of fish. Looking at the cut-up fish, Mia can't help but feel the urge to eat it raw. When the class was over and the students left, Mia couldn't help herself and grabbed the fish and stuffed it into her mouth. The horror for hunger was seen by her classmates. She rushed up to the girl and threatened her not to tell anyone. If she did, she'd be sorry. The girl turned her head and fled the classroom, but when she came back to her senses, Mia regretted what she had done. That day, some girls were applying lipstick, and when no one was looking, they secretly put it in their bags. They didn't do it for lack of money. They did it for the thrill of it. When the clerk found out, the thrill of being chased was exactly what they wanted. Afterwards, they went to the beach to party, and then one of their classmates fell into the sea. Mia didn't know how to swim, but now she had a strange craving for the water. Without hesitation, she jumped in and saved him. It was because of his dive that her body once again underwent a bizarre change. She lifted her clothes and found that gills had grown on her body. The girl lifted her clothes and found that she had gills. Her hand touched the skin and it moved with her breath. Terrified, Mia looked at herself in the mirror. When she got home, something even more horrifying happened. Both of her legs turned completely black and blue, and strange scales grew on them. When her parents weren't home, she rushed to find tweezers to pull off the scales in excruciating pain, but it was so painful that she punched her legs in anger. Broken down, she went to the kitchen and pulled out a kitchen knife, and without hesitation, she slashed at her wrist. She thought that would be the end of it, but when she woke up with a start, she realized that her wrist had somehow healed. Before she knew what was happening, she suddenly realized that her legs had disappeared. Instead, there was a dark brown fishtail. Mia struggled desperately on the ground, but she couldn't get up. Finally, she crawled into the bathtub with all her might. I don't know how long it took for the whole room to be flooded. At that moment, Mia felt more comfortable than she had ever felt before. At that moment, she made a bold decision. She called her best friend and asked her to help her fulfill her last wish. When her best friend arrived, she was stunned to see Mia's face. Knowing that Mia wanted her to return to the sea, her best friend moved Mia to the truck with all her might. Then she took her to the beach, hundreds of kilometers away. Before leaving, she said her last goodbye to her mother. Eventually, Mia came to terms with her differences. She moved her body and swam slowly to the bottom of the ocean. A woman was banging her head against the glass. Mallory, who was passing by, saw this. Terrified, she rushes out of the hospital and signals her sister to drive out of the area. By now, the whole city was in a state of chaos. People on the streets were running like they were possessed. Even the cars on the road were running amok. When Mallory told her sister to hurry home, she also saw that horrible thing. The next moment, her pupils started to turn black, and then she was racing down the street uncontrollably. Mallory immediately grabbed the steering wheel, but they turned the car into a flying car. Luckily, they only suffered a few scratches and bruises, but the next moment, my sister strangely stepped into the middle of the street. She looked back at Mallory with a strange expression. The next thing she knew, she was being driven to heaven by an oncoming truck. Terrified, Mallory rushed to follow the crowd. The next moment, she fell to the ground. A kind woman saw her and came to her rescue. Suddenly, saw a strange sight. She kept repeating, "Mommy, don't go," and got into a burning car. But then a man picked Mallory up. He took Mallory to a nearby house. Mallory was puzzled by the number of strangers from different parts of the world who had gathered in the house. It wasn't until the TV news that she realized there's something terrible out there in the air. If you see it with your eyes, you will be controlled by it. To find out what was out there, the homeowner went upstairs to check the security cameras. He thought he could find out what was out there on the monitor, but as a breeze blew through the monitor, the homeowner's eyes suddenly began to blacken. When they heard the noise, they rushed upstairs to check it out, but they found the homeowner dead as a doornail. Stared, They closed their eyes and stomped on the screen. But it's not a good idea to keep hiding in here because the only food they have will soon be eaten. In order to survive, they have to find a way to go out and get some food in. I've never seen anyone drive like this. First, they painted the windows black. Then they put a layer of newspaper over them. Then they drove blind with the car's navigation and radar systems. It turns out they were trying to avoid the evil spirits outside because there are monsters in the air that can control people. If you open your eyes, you'll be sent to hell. Although the car kept running over something, but the man kept emphasizing that it was a speed bump. But everyone knew in their hearts that it was the bodies of the victims. As they traveled for some distance, suddenly the radar showed a large obstacle ahead. The man was about to back up and go around, but the radar in the back started to sound the alarm. Then a black shadow passes over the car, scaring the fat man and making him run away. It took a lot of effort to get him under control. The radar showed that the car was surrounded by people. Then the car started to shake like crazy. Realizing that it's not a good place to stay, the man gritted his teeth and pressed the gas pedal and ran out of the car. At last, they reached their destination safely. Then they went into the supermarket blindfolded. When the curtains were closed, the blindfolds were removed and they saw that all the supplies were still there. They started to collect the supplies without saying a word. Some of them even had a drink. Just then, there was a knock at the door. The man was about to open the door to check. As soon as he opens the door, the two birds inside start to stir. Mallory warned everyone that something was wrong, but it's too late to close the door. Seeing that the other party is about to break through the door, Fatty pushed them out of the door with a run. When everyone didn't know what to do, there was suddenly a bloodstain seeping out of the doorway. Obviously, Fatty had already left. Realizing that the supermarket is not safe either, they rushed to the car and returned to the house in the same way. However, under this apocalypse, what cannot be tested is the unpredictable human form. On this day, the kind fat sister let in a stranger without authorization. The man in the suit began to complain about his suffering at the drop of a hat. He said that he and his family were hiding well in their home. Suddenly, a group of psychopaths came in and forced them to go out to see the spirits. Then his family committed suicide, knowing that the man in the suit was also hiding from the monsters outside. They let down their guard and accepted him. They didn't realize that the man in the suit was not a real human being, but a puppet controlled by the monsters. The man just tore up the newspaper on the window. The fat girl in the room suddenly became possessed. She jumped out of a 10,000-meter high building. The old lady grabbed the scissors and tried to fight the man in the suit, but she was dragged to the window and had her eyelids forced open until her eyes became cloudy. She stuck the scissors into her neck without saying a word. The reason why the man in the suit was able to open his eyes. In fact, he's a puppet controlled by a monster, not a human being at all. His purpose is to send everyone to hell. A terrified Mallory is holding her two children and shivering. Luckily, the man who woke up managed to finish off the man in the suit. It wasn't until the covers were ripped off Mallory's body that she realized the man in the suit was dead, but the only survivors were the two adults and two dolls that had been weaned at birth. Over time, they had adapted to this life and taught their children to live by ear. But one day, Mallory was out searching for supplies when she heard the roar of an engine outside. Mallory rushed home to tell the men, realizing that these people were puppets controlled by monsters. The man told Mallory to take the children and go out the back door while he fought them to the death from behind. In this way, the man was blindfolded and fought with 5 people who had their eyes open. Although the man was a special forces officer, they were outnumbered. The man had to undo the blindfold and sneak behind them, and then finish them all off with his eyes open. But just as he was about to leave, he suddenly saw the strange monster. In order not to become a puppet of the monster, he shoots himself without saying a word. At this moment, Mallory realizes that the man is dead. She decided to take the children to find the next refuge. For 2 days and nights, they struggled down the river. As Mallory was leading her children through the jungle, the voices of her dead relatives suddenly came to her ears. Realizing that it was the golem that was tempting them to open their eyes, Mallory struggled to control his mind. He pulls his 2 children along with him as he runs wildly to the sound of bird song. Eventually, Mallory Strong will lead him to the safe zone. The people there examined their eyes. They checked their eyes and accepted them as normal. When Mallory took off the blindfold, he realized that the people here were all blind. It's because of their blindness that they weren't targeted by the monsters. This was the end of Mallory's escapade. Bird Box is a nightmarish horror journey that leads the audience into an endless dark abyss. The director uses classic horror elements in this movie, such as eerie sound effects, realistic nightmare scenes, and tense camera switches, which successfully create a tense and disturbing atmosphere. The whole story is full of unpredictable and frightening twists and turns, thus triggering the audience's curiosity and tension. Every corner may hide a horrible secret, making the movie watching process ready to face sudden scares. The plot of the movie is cleverly designed to put the characters in a scary situation that makes you tense for the safety of the main character. The performances of the actors are also a highlight of the movie. They managed to convey the character's sense of fear and helplessness in the face of a supernatural threat. Such emotional resonance strengthens the strong connection between the viewer and the movie, making the entire horror experience all the more real and profound. Overall, Bird Box is an extremely creative and tense horror choice. Viewers are in for a scary time, with unpredictable plot developments and realistic performances that are sure to leave a lasting impression. If you're looking for a thrilling horror ride, this movie is not to be missed.